Delilah,
Yes, Mr. Ben.
may I ask you how you're in this class? I thought your kind was uneducated and lazy.
We're not all like that. I try to learn. That's kind of stereotyping.
Well, you're just special. Why are you getting all offended now? I was only just complimenting you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Delilah, or you can call me Lila. I have a story that I think people will be interested in. It's about a substitute teacher at the high school I attended. He was one of the most horrible people I've ever met, and I'm glad that he wasn't a permanent teacher and didn't come by too frequently. Although I did feel bad for the other classes that he constantly substituted for. So like I said, this teacher didn't come by my class very often. But on the days he did sub in for our classes was basically torture. I am biracial. I'm specifically Afro-Latina. This teacher, let's call him Mr. Ben, did not really like people like me. As a result, I was a target of Mr. Ben most of the time. For a good bit of my high school years, Mr. Ben would attack me with many race-related insults and act very stereotypical towards me and a few other students of color. He started off with very subtle words and things that many of us didn't really pick up on until we finally realized the type of person he was.
Jelani, you like sports? Yeah. I bet you must be very good at basketball. You'd probably be the next Michael Jordan. Not really, I'm trying though.
So when you first hear this, you might think that it was just a compliment. However, you have to admit that it's a little strange and stereotyping Jelani. Nobody thought so, or at least spoke up about it, since this sounded better than blatantly saying something to our fellow classmate's face. But this was only the beginning. Of course, things progressively get worse and worse as time goes on. The next time he substituted, it was for history class. Our lesson for that day was the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I still remember because it was an easy and interesting topic for me. We had sat in class and waited for our teacher to walk in. I think you could imagine the look of horror I had on my face when Mr. Ben walked in. Mr. Ben definitely didn't know how to teach history. There was nothing I could do, though. The substitute teacher walked in and looked at the class with a smug look on his face.
Hello, students. This is history class, is it not? Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about why the Emancipation Proclamation was one of the worst things to be issued. The most obvious thing, it freed slaves. Now we have to pay for other people to do work for us. At least back then, it was a one-time payment sort of thing.
Yeah. Clearly, this was starting to get really weird. Either Mr. Ben had not heard about the constant struggles that slaves went through, or he decided to avoid that major fact completely. My classmates and I were quite shocked, since this was definitely outrageous for someone to say, especially a teacher. Oh, and of course, I'm quite sure that the Civil War barely had any sort of immediate correlation with the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was what we were really supposed to be learning that day. As you can imagine, Mr. Ben got more confident with his racial remarks. I have so many instances of his behavior, but I'll tell you about some of them.
Delilah,
Yes, Mr. Ben.
may I ask you how you're in this class? I thought your kind was uneducated and lazy.
We're not all like that. I try to learn. That's kind of stereotyping.
Well, you're just special. Why are you getting all offended now? I was only just complimenting you.
Damn it, this guy was annoying. I was only just trying to tell him that his statement was honestly kind of a weird thing to say, but he turned around and got upset at me, claiming that what he'd said was just him trying to be nice to me. But it wasn't like I could really say anything. I knew that other staff would try to defend him and say that he was a sweet old man or whatever, that he probably didn't know that that was stereotypical. There was another time where Mr. Ben asked me if I knew how to talk to monkeys and if I ever had one as a pet. Like, what in the world is this substitute thinking? He has so much time to decide that a question is not a good idea, yet he always comes out and just makes everyone feel bad. Mr. Ben was quite brave. I had to give this to him. But I absolutely hated his guts. Our principal was a black woman, and this bitch of a teacher liked to talk trash about her behind her back. So not only would he bully me and other kids like me, he also bullied our school's own principal. He'd say things such as,
I wonder how Principal Lana got her job. I feel like she had to cheat her way there. There's no way someone like her did well enough in school to be a proper principal.
He'd also say,
It's weird hearing Principal Lana speak like a white person. I thought her kind only used slang and such.
So is he implying that black individuals shouldn't be educated? I think that's exactly where this is going. But I think the most infuriating part is the fact that Mr. Ben would suck up to our principal so much, and she ended up announcing him as the substitute teacher of the year. Wow, if only she knew sooner how much of a horrible person he was. Anyway, though, him earning that title wasn't a big deal to me, even though I felt really bad for Principal Lana. However, there was one last instance that did it for me. Mr. Ben was substituting for our science class, and we had a pop quiz. I was just jotting down my answers when Mr. Ben began to ask me to create a formula that could make things lighter. I was just starting to answer, but I caught on. I admit, I got a little angered because I knew this was just another sly way to imply that he didn't like my color and wanted me to get lighter. Do you think I'm exaggerating? Listen to what happened next. Why do I need to tell you the answer? It's not part of our current curriculum.
Oh, I know, Delilah. I was just giving you some personal suggestions, and I suggest you take them. You'd be such a beauty with lighter skin.
Mm-hmm. You see that now? I yelled at him, and this got me an after-school detention. I was absolutely enraged, and in that moment of anger, I came up with a brilliant plan that I wanted to execute with a friend of mine. About a week after the incident, my friend Mia and I were ready. We had been asking around for a week, trying to find out what time the principal came out of her office to check on the school. Some of the student assistants told us that it was usually around noon when she'd come out. This was great. We didn't need any hall passes to make this happen. We also did a bit of snooping and managed to snag a women's lingerie magazine from Mr. Ben's bag. This was the absolute best thing to use for what we were about to pull off. Our plan was simple. We stand somewhere we know the principal will walk by and begin reading the magazine out loud. Hopefully she hears and tries to question us. In response, we will tell her that Mr. Ben offered to let us read it, and he will get in big trouble. So the day this plan was put into action, Mia and I sat on a picnic bench near a sidewalk that we knew was a common place for students and staff to walk by. We started to read the magazine and made sure that the photo of the woman on the cover was very obvious for someone to see. It was kind of embarrassing in the first 10 minutes since many classmates stared at us like we had escaped from an asylum. This was nothing, though. Our target was just Principal Lana. But then the unthinkable happened. Mr. Ben walked down the sidewalk. Oh, snap. We only noticed him when he was 4 feet away from us, and by then the substitute knew what we had in our hands.
What in the hell are you girls doing with my magazine? No wonder I couldn't find it in my bag. You two are just some stupid and mindless thieves.
Sir, this is your magazine? Mia was playing the innocent card. This was smart. But since this was unexpected, we were both scared.
Of course it's my magazine. Give it back.
I flinched as Mr. Ben tried grabbing the magazine back from us, and I threw it into the bushes nearby. The substitute growled at us and began to say a bunch of nasty words. Let's just say there were a few bad slurs thrown at Mia and me. Today was going to be our death day. Or maybe not, because another huge thing happens. That day was just such a blur of event after event.
Mr. Ben, what do you think you're doing bullying my students like this? I stood here and listened to you insulting them for 5 minutes straight now.
The principal herself has come out to save the day. Just like we had with Mr. Ben, we didn't notice Principal Lana, but I assume she'd been hearing everything for a while now. Mia and I now watched with amusement as the principal called for security. Mr. Ben got dragged away, and Principal Lana told us to come to her office, where we gave our statements about Mr. Ben and how he was a horrid person. She listened and agreed. She really had heard all of the bad stuff he said to us, and she would be firing him immediately. I think I might have celebrated for a week straight due to my happiness. Finally, Mr. Ben was gone. I went on to live my life happily, now knowing that some crummy substitute teacher with this deep hatred wouldn't bother me for a while. Months after I graduated, I read a news article about a white male who had gotten killed during an altercation between him and a few black males. A video was attached to it. In the video, I saw Mr. Ben walking up to people eating food and yelling, standing in a very threatening pose. Then the people he yelled at stood up and they shoved each other for a bit before Mr. Ben ran for whatever reason. Seconds later, a taxi slammed into him. Yikes. Even after getting fired, Mr. Ben hadn't learned anything. He chose to even pick fights with people that were just trying to enjoy their day. Is it weird that his death was kind of satisfying for me? Let me know, and thank you for listening to this story.